On a rainy winter evening, Leo nervously tapped his fingers against the steering wheel as he stared intensely at the gas station. He repeatedly took in deep breaths in an attempt to calm his nerves. His friend, Kris, sat next to him in the passenger seat, smoking one of his last cigarettes. Neither of them spoke to the other. It was so quiet that it felt like they could hear every little raindrop that landed on their car. Leo and Kris had been friends and partners for 3 years. Both of them had records of shoplifting, armed robbery, and theft. Leo's life of crime began at a young age. His father, a very kind and loving man, passed away when he was young. His passing and loss of income forced Leo and his mother to move to a rougher part of town. To cope with the stress and loss, she tried to find solace in alcohol. Sadly, the bottle wasn't the only thing she hit over time. Leo was often the victim of her fits of rage and violence. Fed up with the abuse, he ran away at the age of 16. He would steal purses, shoplift, and rob local gas stations to survive. But his luck eventually ran out after being arrested while trying to break into someone's car. At age 21, he was sentenced to serve 5 years in prison for armed robberies, shoplifting, and attempted motor vehicle theft. Kris grew up with a similar background. However, while Leo tried to avoid violence, Kris sought it out. When he was 19, he ran with a local gang that participated in gun trafficking and marketed illegal drugs. It was common for them to use brutality to expand their territory. He was particularly good at intimidating and fighting rival gangs. Being 6'2" and built like a tank helped. He always carried a butterfly knife and brass knuckles wherever he went. Despite his violent disposition, he would avoid killing if possible. He seldom felt the need to go that far. Unlike Leo, his gang's luck ran out. The police posed as clients wanting to buy arms from them illegally. When Kris and his crew arrived, an ambush occurred. They scattered, but Kris was the only one who managed to escape. He never returned to the remaining gang members out of fear that they would kill him for abandoning the others. From that point on, he would be on his own. That was until he met Leo 7 years later. They were at a local bar, and when a couple of drunk truckers tried to hassle Leo, Kris stepped in to defend him. And since that night, the two became inseparable. For Kris, Leo was like his younger brother, and as for Leo, Kris was the first person he truly felt he could trust. To survive, they combined their talents to pull off various crimes, and while they experienced much success working together, there were also way too many close calls as of late. The police were starting to catch up to them, and they couldn't shake off that familiar feeling that it was only a matter of time till their luck, once again, ran out. Kris exhaled the smoke from his lungs one last time before tossing his cigarette out the window. He looked over at Leo and could see that he was anxious. Kris sighed heavily and pulled down his ski mask before making eye contact.
Nerves getting to you, Leo?
Leo didn't break his focus. The rain and sight of their next target occupied all his senses. Kris slapped him in the arm with the back of his hand. Startled, he glanced over at Kris. Huh? No, I'm fine. Kris squinted his eyes.
Bull. I know that look. You're a wreck. You can't stop tapping your fingers against the steering wheel, and you look like a deer in headlights. Listen, I get it. We've had a lot of close calls lately. This is what we do to have to survive. We hit a gas stations many times. We'll do what we've always done. We'll get in, grab the cash, and get out fast. Quick 2-minute job. Cops won't have time to respond and catch us. We'll do this last hit, and then lay low for a while. Put the cops off our scent. Okay?
Leo didn't respond. He just nodded his head and exhaled deeply.
Good. Put your mask on. Let's get to work. I'll even handle the cashier this time. You make sure nobody decides to play the hero.
Kris opened the passenger door and stepped out into the rain. It was hard to see him at first, as he wore all black clothing. Leo sighed one more time, then opened his door and stepped outside. The rain beat against them as they walked side by side out of the alleyway and towards the gas station. Just one more job, then we lay low. Once they reached the entrance, Kris put his hand on the handle.
Ready, partner?
Leo nodded, and checked his watch. It was 10:37 p.m. A grin crept over Kris's face. He pulled out his knife with his free hand and barged into the gas station towards the cashier. Leo followed close behind him and unholstered his pistol.
Everyone on the ground, now!
The look of shock and terror was plastered over everyone's faces when they saw their weapons. Leo began signaling everyone to lie on the floor with his pistol. Meanwhile, Kris grabbed the cashier's collar and pulled him close to his face. He glared into the man's fearful eyes and gently placed the tip of his knife against his throat. Tiny drops of blood trickled down the man's neck.
You know why we're here. Hand over the cash.
He then let go of the man's collar and smiled.
Please.
Without saying a word, the young man opened the cash register and began handing the cash to Kris. As Kris was collecting the money, Leo paced around the room, keeping his eyes on all the customers. When he glanced at his watch, it read 10:41 p.m. He cursed silently to himself, then looked back over at Kris. "How's the money coming along? Are you through yet?" Seeing that they were distracted, one of the customers quickly dialed 911, muted it, and then put it back in her pocket. She prayed that the police could rely on their wireless location to track them. The cashier gave Kris the last dollar bill from the register.
There. You have all the money. Please don't hurt me.
Kris pointed the knife towards the man's waist.
Really? All of it? What about your wallet?
When the cashier's jaw dropped, Kris slammed his fist violently against the counter.
Hand over the wallet.
Leo swore to himself again and made his way to Kris. "What are you doing? We're supposed to grab the cash from the register then leave. We've already been here for too long." Kris glared at Leo.
287 from the cash register ain't gonna get us far, and you know it. If you want to get out of here faster, start collecting from the other folk and make it quick. We make this last count.
Leo made his way to the group and ordered them to pull their wallets out and toss them in front of them. At first, everyone hesitated. Needing more encouragement, Leo pointed his pistol in the air and shot off a round. The jarring gunshot shocked the people out of their trance. They reached into their purses and back pockets and threw their wallets a few feet in front of them. As Leo began collecting everyone's belongings, he looked at one of the clocks on the wall. It was now 10:45 p.m. Kris snatched the wallet out of the cashier's hand and then made his way to one of the men on the ground. As Kris bent down to grab the wallet, Kevin, the manager, grabbed his wrist and yanked him over as he shot up onto his feet. Kris lost his footing and tumbled toward his attacker. He was just as big as Kris and had been running the gas station for a few years. During that time, he had seen his fair share of petty crime. As Kris tumbled forward, Kevin socked him square in the nose. Dazed, Kris dropped his knife onto the floor. Kevin then wrapped his arms around his neck, putting him in a guillotine chokehold. Kris posted his hands on Kevin's left knee to prevent himself from being lifted. Leo stopped collecting everyone's wallets and pointed his gun towards Kevin. "Let him go."
Or what? You'll shoot me? You don't have the guts to pull that trigger.
Leo's hand began to tremble.
You've never taken a life, have you? Used to everyone just doing what they're told, and you never thought someone would step up to you. That's...
Before Kevin could complete his thought, Kris used his right hand to hit the man's crotch. The pain forced Kevin to lose his grip just enough for him to break free. Kris grabbed his knife and stabbed Kevin's leg. He cried out in pain as he fell backward. And Kris coughed a few times, cleared his throat, and then approached Kevin and yanked the knife out of his leg. He then stood back up and started making his way over to Leo.
Did you manage to get everything?
Yeah, I have everything we need. Kris, are you...
I'm fine. Let's get moving.
As they were about to leave, multiple cruisers pulled up and blocked the front exit. The bright red and blue lights temporarily blinded Leo and Kris. Crap, it's the cops. One of the officers stepped out of their vehicle and trained their weapons on them. Leo's heart pounded in his chest. He slowly took a step back and looked at Kris. From just the look of his eyes, Leo knew that he was about to make a break for it. They nodded before turning their backs toward the cops. Leo decided to make a beeline towards the back exit. He crashed through the rear entrance, expecting to be greeted by the fresh, cool air of the night. Instead, he found himself in a dimly lit hallway. Confused, he slowly stopped and looked around the room, panting heavily as he tried to catch his breath. He then glanced over his shoulder to see if the police were following him. To his surprise, the door he just came through was no longer there. Instead, there was a gray stone brick wall. He slowly approached it and reached his hand out to touch it. What just happened? Where's the door? Leo thought to himself. He placed his hand against it and tried gently pushing, but it didn't budge. He pushed against the wall repeatedly. Realizing it wasn't some trick wall or decoration, he turned around and looked down the vast hallway. Leo's breathing quickened as panic began to overtake him. He ran his hands across the top of his head and observed his surroundings. White fluorescent lights dimly lit the hall. The floor was solid concrete and the walls were plain stone bricks. There were no significant features about the narrow hallway, which seemed to stretch into eternity. Leo stood frozen in place for a few minutes before cautiously stepping forward. He placed his hand on the wall to his right and felt the grainy texture. He then looked up and noticed the lights emitted a quiet buzzing sound. Leo returned his attention to the path in front of him. Where am I? He quickened his pace before breaking out into a full-on sprint. He was eager to find the answer to that question. As he ran down the hallway, he eventually found another path that broke off to his right. It, too, seemed to stretch on to eternity. When he came to a stop, he bent over and tried to catch his breath. Feeling overheated, he took off his ski mask and threw it on the ground. You've got to be kidding me. How big is this place? Neither of the seemingly infinite hallways differed from the other. The attempt to even look ahead caused Leo to have a headache. He sat on the floor and buried his face in his hands. Stress and frustration had overtaken him. He sobbed for a few minutes, then looked up and faced the hallway directly in front of him. He took in a few deep breaths and slowly got up onto his feet. While the deep breathing helped, the feeling of uncertainty still lingered. Leo looked at the different paths before deciding to go right. Instead of looking down the vast hallways, he focused on the floor before him and would occasionally look up to see where he was going. Just looking down the narrow hallway only filled him with dread and anxiety. Many different thoughts and questions swirled in his mind. What if I was on the right path? How long have I been here, and what if these hallways never end? Does anyone even know where I am? What happened to Kris? Where did he go? He looked up and saw a hallway that went right and left. This time, the hallway to his right seemed to only stretch on for a little before turning left. Leo began to jog down that hallway to his right. When he reached the end, he took his left and saw that the new hallway also ended and would force him to go right. He jogged down, hopeful that he would find the exit soon. When he turned, there was another long hall. This time, however, there were multiple hallways on both his right and left sides. Leo slowly walked forward and glanced down the halls to his right and left. All of them differed. Some seemed to stretch on and on, while others had either a dead end or led to different paths. Leo began to laugh as he quickened his pace. Fantastic! I'm a rat in this accursed maze. The fear and anxiety he had been feeling for so long turned into anger. He started running once again down various hallways. Whenever he would reach a dead end, he would frustratedly hit the wall before turning back around and trying a different path. He ran around before tripping over his foot and landing hard on the concrete floor. He groaned before breaking down into tears once again. He rolled over to his side and allowed the tears to flow freely. I'm never getting out of here. That thought further crushed what little hope he had. Propping himself against a wall, he massaged his bruised knees and hip and closed his eyes to rest. He was then interrupted by his growling stomach. It looks like I've been here for a while. Leo leaned against a wall and got back onto his feet. He winced in pain after taking a few steps forward. Wrapping his arms around himself for comfort, he walked down hallway after hallway and faced many dead ends. It wasn't long until exhaustion got the best of him. Leo sat down and rested against the wall. Slowly, his eyes closed, and he slipped into unconsciousness. He was jolted awake when he heard a low, gurgling moan in the distance. Cautiously, he got up onto his feet and stared down the direction from whence the noise came. After a few minutes of silence, he released a long-held breath. His heart sank deep into his stomach. A part of him hoped that the whole thing was just a nightmare. He began walking down a hallway that would eventually force him to go right. During his walk, Leo's stomach continually growled. His stomach felt tighter from the lack of food, and it was becoming common for him to feel lightheaded due to dehydration. There's gotta be some food or water in this place. Leo abruptly stopped cold in his tracks. His face grew pale and his legs felt weak. What hung no more than 15 feet in front of him was a man's corpse. A chain hanging from the roof wrapped tightly around his left ankle and suspended him. His fingers were mere inches away from the ground. Near his left hand was a broken off chain that lay on the floor. It looked like the poor man had been hanging there for a long time, as most of his flesh was decomposed. His eye sockets were empty, and his jaw was missing. Dry blood marked the walls and floor beneath him. The powerful ostre that protruded from the man's decomposing body was strong enough to make Leo's eyes tear up. He covered his mouth and tried not to throw up. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep it down and ended up regurgitating what little food remained in his stomach. He shivered afterward and slowly looked up at the corpse. He wiped his mouth and pressed his back against the right wall. He then slowly moved towards the body, hoping that he could create enough space so he could pass it without touching him. As he got closer, Leo saw that the man had worn a torn leather jacket and gloves. Patches of skulls and crosses marked the man's jacket. Leo's heart rate quickened as he stood only a few inches away from the corpse. It was his first time seeing such a grotesque, violent sight. As Leo slipped past the corpse, he almost jumped out of his skin when he felt the man's arm brush up against his body. This prompted him to move faster. Once he got past the corpse, a chill ran down his spine, and he continued down the hall and never looked back. He suddenly remembered the monstrous moan he had heard earlier, and realized he was not alone. Whatever that thing was, it must have killed that man. His mind raced with questions. What happened to him? How did that man get here, and who was he? Is anyone else trapped here with me? Not only did he have to worry about the possibility of dying from a lack of food and water, but there was also now someone, or something, roaming these halls. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being hunted. Images of all the possible ways he could die by just those dangling chains alone were enough to make his teeth chatter. Thoughts of giving up began to creep into his mind. He still had his pistol after all. At the very least, a bullet is a quick way to go. Even the idea of lying on the ground and accepting death in whatever form came sounded a lot more appealing than constantly navigating the seemingly endless hallways. He loathed turning a corner only to find a dead end or another long hall. There was no sign of escape, and he was about to hit his breaking point. Leo turned another corner and found a random work desk in the middle of the hallway. It was made of steel chassis and had a laminated wood surface. There were 3 drawers on its left side and one in the middle. Leo approached the desk and opened the middle drawer. Inside was a half-eaten bag of chips. His eyes grew wide as he shoved his hand into the bag and devoured what fragments remained. He then quickly opened the other side drawers. The top one was empty. The second had a half-empty bottle of water. He twisted off the cap and chugged it down in under 5 seconds. For once in a long time, Leo began to feel hopeful about his predicament. Perhaps there was a way to make it through this. The third drawer had a folded up sheet of paper with a pencil right next to it. "Oh, what's this?" said Leo silently. He grabbed the folded up piece of paper and opened it. The short note read, "I have roamed these halls for days. It is stalking me. Its moans grow louder and louder. I know I don't have much time. If you're reading this, avoid the halls with scratch marks. I've marked the paths I've walked with a broken off chain, and they lead to nowhere. I pray you find a way out. I pray we find a way out." Despite just drinking a bottle of water, Leo's throat went dry. That man hanging from the ceiling must have been the one who wrote this. He probably was the one who left the bag of chips and water in the drawer just in case someone else needed it. A tear of gratitude fell down his cheek as he silently thanked the man for his thoughtfulness and put the note back in the drawer. He was about to toss the empty bag and bottle on the floor but hesitated. A sigh then escaped his lips. I don't know if anyone else will find this, but I'd hate to crush whatever hope they may have by finding these items. He crushed the bottle and empty bag and shoved them into his pocket. With renewed vigor and hope, he pressed on. Time passed slowly, and since Leo read that note and saw the corpse, he kept his pistol in hand with the safety off. Instead of mindlessly walking around, Leo avoided the halls with scratch marks and always peeked around every corner just in case something was there. Peeking around another corner, Leo saw nothing but darkness. That's odd. Up to this point, every hallway had fluorescent lights. Carefully, he stepped from the corner and aimed his pistol. His heart began to race, and sweat perspired from his forehead, and he gripped his gun tightly. He wanted to run, but a part of him wondered if this could be the way out. It didn't make much sense, but nothing did at this point. Leo was about to take a step before a pale, white face slowly emerged from the darkness. He stopped dead in his tracks. The pale, white face was a few feet away, but he could make out more of its features as it got closer. It had the appearance of a man. A big, crazed smile stretched across its face. And while he was primarily pale as snow, his jaw wasn't. It was a little darker than the rest of his skin. His eyes also didn't seem to fit into their sockets either. They were brown, very bloodshot, and looked like they could pop out at any moment. The nose was also very long and pointy. It too was a different color. It didn't match the pale skin, nor did it match its jaw. Its nose was much darker, and like its eyes or jaw, it didn't fit nicely onto its face. Leo's hands began to tremble, his breathing became more rapid, and his mind kept shouting at him to run, but he couldn't. The thing stopped moving closer. By now, it was a mere 3 feet away. He still couldn't see the body, only the face was visible. The creature never blinked, nor did it break eye contact. It felt like time had come to a complete stop. It was so quiet and tense that Leo could hear every thump from his beating heart. What are you? There was a slight tremor in his voice. The thing didn't respond. Leo swallowed hard, and his trigger finger began to twitch. I'll blow your head off if you don't start talking. No response came from the mysterious creature. Leo's fear turned into anger. He ground his teeth before pulling the trigger multiple times. The deafening gunshots echoed through the halls. The bullets pierced the darkness and struck the creature numerous times. The shots managed to blow out its left eye and shatter the left side of its jaw. Yet despite being shot multiple times, it never flinched. A dark, thick liquid began to trickle down from its left eye and jaw. Leo's eyes widened as the creature's grin somehow stretched further across its face. Suddenly, its head ascended higher and higher. Leo took a few steps back. Neither of them broke eye contact as he watched its head almost hit the ceiling. When it stopped moving, it gurgled something that chilled Leo to the bone. What beautiful facial features you have. Then an enormous claw came out of the darkness and grabbed onto the corner. Realizing that it was about to lunge at him, Leo quickly broke out into a sprint and ran down the hallway from which he just came. He could hear the creature's joints pop as it slowly revealed itself from the darkness. Leo took as many turns as possible, hoping to throw off whatever that thing was. He was running faster than he ever had in his entire life. His whole body was full of adrenaline, and every instinct to escape and survive kicked in. A loud screech echoed through the hall. It didn't sound too far off. That thing was gaining on him, and it was moving fast. Tears filled his eyes as images of the hanging man and the creature's malicious grin plagued his mind. Eventually, the adrenaline started to wear off, and his legs began to ache and burn. He took a right turn and then came to an abrupt stop. All the fluorescent lights were off except one at the hall's end. There the light shone on a plain white door with a silver doorknob. Leo's eyes widened, and he wasted no time. He used whatever energy he had and sprinted toward the door. Halfway down, he heard that familiar screech close behind him. Leo looked over his shoulder and saw that the creature had just turned the corner. It faced his direction, and he could see how tall it was for a moment. It could have stood well over 7 feet if the roof wasn't there. Its neck was long, and its entire body was jet black. It had a long torso and lanky arms. Its white claws almost touched the ground. Its legs were also long and slender, and its knees bent backwards. The sight of that thing was enough to make Leo's head hurt. It let out one last blood-curdling screech before charging at him on all fours. It completely disappeared in the darkness. The only thing that gave away its presence was the sound of its claws scratching against the floor. Leo looked ahead and saw that he was only a few feet away from the door. Come on, come on, come on! He stretched his hand to the doorknob and grabbed hold of it. He then swung the door open just enough for him to slip through. As he turned to shut the door, he saw the monster's face emerge from the shadows, claws outstretched to grab him. Leo screamed and closed the door as fast as he could. He then shut his eyes and firmly held onto the doorknob, hoping that he could prevent it from opening the door from the other side. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes slowly, but didn't dare to let go of the doorknob. After waiting a few more minutes, Leo slowly backed away from the door. The creature never attempted to break through. It never even scratched or slammed its body against the door. Leo slowly pressed his ear against the door to hear if it was still there. Nothing. There was absolute silence. He turned his back on the door and saw 2 staircases. The one on the left went up, while the other went down. Leo prudently took a few steps forward and saw a sign on the wall separating the 2 stairways. The sign read, Prison, Level 4, Upstairs. Asylum, Level 2, Downstairs. Leo shook his head in disbelief. Oh, this place has a sick sense of humor. Of course these are the only 2 options. Why wouldn't it be a prison or an asylum? Leo paced around the room and placed both hands behind his head. He's already been to prison, which wasn't a pleasant experience. It was honestly the last place he ever wanted to end up at. However, asylum means trouble. Would there be lunatics down there? What other monsters lurked around? Leo approached the 2 staircases and sighed deeply. Maybe if I can get to level 1, I can get out of this place. He checked his clip to see how many bullets were left, and only 2 remained. Oh, lovely. He put the clip back into his gun and slowly descended the stairs. Upon reaching the bottom of the steps, he saw a door made of steel. Leo pushed the heavy door open. The loud squeak that followed made Leo cringe. So much for a quiet entrance. When the door was fully open, Leo observed his new surroundings. The halls were a lot broader and more spacious than the previous level. The floor had a white and green checkered pattern to it. Steel doors with green coating were on both sides of the hallway. Fluorescent lights lit up the halls, but this time they made a louder buzzing noise than the previous ones. The walls and doors were also in poor condition. Some of the doors looked like they were about to fall off their hinges. When Leo took a step forward, the door behind him slowly closed shut. When he heard a click, he turned around to see if it had disappeared. Surprisingly, it hadn't. Leo opened the door and saw the room from whence he just came. Oh, fascinating. Leo made his way down the hall and opened doors along the way. Most of the time, they were just empty rooms. Eventually, he stumbled upon a room with a rusted pipe and broken steel chair. Remembering the hanging man's strategy to mark the halls, Leo grabbed the rusted pipe and started to draw scratch marks on the right side of wherever hallway he traveled. And over time, the sound of the fluorescent lights and steel scraping against concrete and dry wall began to drive him insane. His headache was intense, and the lack of food and water did not help. He set the pipe down at one point and fell onto his hands and knees. He plugged his ears and slowly rocked back and forth. Leo hummed a tune to himself to block out the obnoxious buzzing from the lights above. It felt like whatever mental sanity he had left was about to snap. Leo chuckled at this thought. It would be ironic for someone to lose their mind on a level such as this. Out of nowhere, Leo could hear a soft hum from a distance, and it was humming the same tune. Slowly, he opened his eyes and looked toward the direction of the sound. For a moment, he thought he saw another tall, dark figure standing in the middle of the hall, but when he laid eyes on it, it vanished. Leo squinted his eyes and then rubbed them with his hands. His headache was making it extremely difficult for him to think clearly. Part of him wanted to believe he saw things, but deep down inside, he knew better. He knew he was not alone and needed to find the exit fast. Leo placed one hand against the wall and lifted himself onto his feet. Not long after he got up, a petrifying scream echoed around him. It sounded like a woman. Leo quickly turned around and aimed his pistol but saw no one. Oh, screw this. Leo turned around and began to jog down the hall. Footsteps tailed close behind him. A glance behind his shoulders revealed that nobody was there with him. Leo didn't care. He hastened his pace and turned a corner whenever he had the chance. However, this did not stop the occasional scream or loud footsteps from following him. The screams were never the same. Sometimes they were men, sometimes women. Even children could be heard screaming bloody murder. Those screams were the ones that haunted him the most. It didn't take long for exhaustion to overtake his body. Leo stopped running and leaned against the wall. He panted heavily and noticed that the door to his right was slightly opened. He looked over his shoulder one more time before opening the door. It was dark and stuffy. The light from the hall revealed that it was mostly empty except for the tiny stool in the corner. Leo hesitated until he heard another woman scream. He hastily entered the room and closed the door behind him. A loud sigh escaped his lips when he sat down and rested his back against the wall. He rested the pistol on his lap, but kept it aimed at the closed door. Sleep was about to overtake him before he heard more footsteps outside. They were coming closer. Quickly, Leo aimed his pistol and held his breath. The steps moved slowly and methodically. His hands grew sweaty and unsteady. Fear swiftly swept away what little peace he had. The footsteps suddenly stopped just a few feet away from his door. Silence again filled the room. It didn't take long for them to pick up again. It moved quickly and purposefully and would be in the same room in seconds. Leo gripped the pistol tightly as he braced for whatever was coming. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. At this point, Leo was quivering. He placed his other hand on the bottom of the pistol to help stabilize it. The doorknob turned, and the door was slowly pushed open. Leo was about to pull the trigger when he saw a man's figure standing in the doorway. The light coming from the hallway was almost blinding, and it was difficult for his eyes to adjust. He squinted and slowly made out the person in front of him. It was Kris. Kris? Is that you? No response was given. Leo slowly got up onto his feet. Come on, man, answer me. Kris slowly unsheathed his butterfly knife. Leo's eyes widened. Kris, it's me, Leo. What are you doing? Kris took a step forward.
How do I know it's you?
What are you talking about? Kris, be rational. Who else would I be?
What were we doing before we ended up here?
Are you serious? We were robbing a gas station.
Go on.
Well, it was supposed to be our last job, and everything was going fine until you got into a fight with the store manager. Then before we knew it, the police arrived and we made a run for it. I ran out the back door, expecting to be in some alleyway, but I ended up on a level like this instead. Kris nodded slowly, then sheathed his knife.
Sorry. I'm on edge. I've heard things while trapped here. We're not alone. I don't know what's happening or where we are.
You're telling me I almost got killed by some creature straight out of a horror movie. Even saw a hanging corpse. None of this makes sense. The halls, the monsters, all of it is insane. I'm lucky to have escaped what I assume is level 3 alive.
Wait, there are levels? How many are there? What are you talking about?
Honestly, I have no idea. I chose to come here because level 4 is a prison, and well, you know how I feel about that place. I was hoping I could find a way out of here and escape to level 1. But Kris, I have to ask, how did you get here? What happened to you? Did you also run out of the back exit?
No, I didn't try to make it out of the fear of being shot, so I ran into the restroom hoping that there would be a window I could escape through. Sure enough, there was a window, however, it had steel bars. At that point, I knew it was over. I waited a long time for the police to barge in, but they never did. Eventually, I put my knife away and peeked through the door to see what was happening. And Leo, the strangest thing, opened the door and found myself here instead. I don't know how to explain it. After a while, I ended up eventually stepping into a hallway. When I turned around, the door was gone. And its place was just a wall.
Hey, same thing happened to me. The door was just gone. The two of them stood in silence for a moment.
So, what are we gonna do now?
We can't stay here, that's for sure. I don't want to find out what lurks in these halls, and I know we can't fight it if it's anything like what I just escaped from. Trust me, the monster on the previous level, I shot it a few times in the face, and it didn't even budge. So what have you found on this level so far? Any food? Water? Supplies?
Nothing. How long have you been here?
I have no idea. My watch stopped working, and I lost track a long time ago. Kris ran his fingers through his hair and exhaled heavily. He turned his back to Leo and leaned against the doorframe. "Are you okay, Kris?" Leo said as he placed a hand on his shoulder.
No, I'm not okay. What was supposed to be a simple hit and run turned into a game of cat and mouse. We were stuck in an asylum with infinite halls, doors without food or water. There's also a big chance we were being hunted by who knows what. How are we supposed to find our way out?
Well, I used this pipe to mark the walls as I navigated this place. Kris looked over his shoulder and stared at the pipe on the ground. I did it so that I could easily navigate my way back to where I came from, just in case of an emergency. But Kris, I don't think going up the levels is how we get out, and we need to reach the first level. And it only makes sense that that would be the way out of here.
I hate this place, Leo.
I know. I haven't been here nearly as long as you have, and it has already been a grueling experience. The screams, footsteps, buzzing lights, it all adds up.
You hear screams too?
Yeah, I have. I've heard men, women, and even children too.
I thought I was losing my mind. What about the voices? Do you hear voices in your head too? Do they tell you to do awful things?
That question caught Leo off guard. Voices? No, I've only heard screams and footsteps, Kris. His head dropped. But maybe if I were in here longer, I would hear them too. Look, don't worry about it. I believe you. It's these halls and whatever lurks in them. It's trying to get to you. Just ignore those voices, okay? Kris nodded, but never made eye contact. Okay, good. So now are you ready to find a way out of here? Kris looked up.
Yeah, let's head out.
Leo picked up the pipe from the ground and walked out of the room. Kris stood there for a moment before turning around to follow him. The halls were silent. At least there weren't any screams or footsteps. Only the buzzing from the lights above could be heard. Leo again used the pipe to mark the walls. Kris had a more challenging time keeping up with Leo's pace. The lack of food and water was taking a heavy toll. He stumbled often, and his shoulders were hunched over. Nevertheless, they pressed on. They turned many corners and walked down many long halls. They checked every door along the way to see if there would be any items in the room. Unfortunately, most of them were empty. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Kris fell onto his hands and knees. He placed his hands on his ears and let out a blood-curdling scream. It almost scared the life out of Leo.
Get out. Get out of my head. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Go away.
Leo rushed over to Kris and fell on his knees beside him. Kris, what's wrong? Before he could ask another question, Kris jerked his head towards Leo's direction and glared into his eyes. Although he wanted to comfort his friend, Leo quickly got onto his feet and took a few steps back. Kris's eyes were extremely bloodshot and full of rage. Veins bulged out of his neck and hands. Kris began to pound on his head violently before finally calming down. He took a few deep breaths and then looked up at Leo. The rage in his eyes were replaced with fear.
I'm sorry you had to see that. The voices are getting louder and louder. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid, Leo. I don't know what's happened to me or how to stop it.
Admittedly, Leo wasn't sure what was happening either, and more importantly, he didn't know how or if there was a way to help. Let's just keep moving. I'm sure if we find a way out, that might help. I think whatever lurks on these levels cannot leave. I believe the entities are trapped here. Maybe if we find a way out, the voices will stop. Leo stretched out his hands and helped Kris onto his feet. Here, wrap your arm around my shoulders. I know you don't have a lot of strength left. Kris hated receiving so much help, but Leo was right. His legs were starting to wobble, and his shoulders felt like they were carrying a ton of weight. Once Kris wrapped his left arm around Leo's shoulders, they continued to navigate to the halls. They went back to checking every room they passed and marked every hall they walked. Occasionally, they would stumble upon a hallway with their markings already on it. At some points, Leo wanted to follow the markings back to where he came from, but a gut feeling told him that going back was not the solution. It just didn't make sense. Yet at the same time, he knew his friend was suffering and needed to get out of there. Ultimately, Leo continued to search for a different exit. Kris, at this point, hardly said a word. For the most part, he was dead silent, but occasionally, he would start mumbling to himself. Nothing he said was comprehensible. After opening numerous doors, they found a room with writings on the wall. Leo's jaw dropped once he read the inscription. "Let me out," was inscribed on the wall multiple times. What the... Before Leo could finish his sentence, Kris looked up and stared at the writings on the wall. His eyes rolled back instantly, and he collapsed onto the floor. Kris?
Let me out. Let me out.
He mumbled those words as his head jerked from side to side. Leo slowly bent down and stretched out an arm towards Kris' shoulder. "You're gonna be okay, man. You can get through this." Before resting his hand on his shoulder, Kris grabbed his wrist. Leo tried to break free, but his grip was too firm. Kris slowly opened his eyes and stared at Leo. They were rolled back. Without warning, Kris pulled Leo closer until their faces were only inches apart. A big smile stretched across his face. It was eerily similar to the smile the thing on the previous level had, but something felt more sinister about this.
Let me out.
This time, Kris no longer sounded like himself, and his words echoed and sounded like they came from every direction. The screams from before returned, and all the doors repeatedly opened and slammed shut. Sweat beat down Leo's face. "Come on, man, we gotta go. Snap out of it." Leo then proceeded to slap Kris several times with his free hand. After a few blows, Kris's eyes returned to normal. Leo grabbed his arm and helped Kris onto his feet. Both of them stumbled out of the room. The hallway, once plain and void of any irregularities, now had markings and messages plastered everywhere. They continued to make their way down the hall and did all they could to ignore the loud noises. Whenever Kris would look at the writings on the wall, his eyes would twitch, and his speech became slurred. Noticing this, Leo used one of his hands to cover Kris's eyes. After turning several corners, they found a bright red door at the end of another long hallway. "Oh, of course it's a long one," Leo said as he adjusted Kris's arms. "We're almost there, buddy. Just hang on." As they made their way towards the red door, the screams became louder, and the doors continued to open and slam shut. Once they were halfway down the hall, a sinister laugh could be heard from behind them. Leo slowly turned his head over his left shoulder to see what made the noise. Down the hall stood the dark figure he first saw when he entered this level. This time, however, it did not disappear. Like the creature on the previous level, it stood well over 7 feet tall. It wasn't as slender as the previous creature was. Its smile was crooked and revealed many razor-sharp teeth. Its eyes were black with tiny white pupils. The strangest and most off-putting thing about it was that it wore a white straitjacket. Its arms were trapped as its sleeves reached around to its backside. Before he could look any longer, the lights above suddenly exploded. The only things that could be seen were its white pupils and smile. Soon after the first lights blew up, more followed. They began to blow up more rapidly towards their direction. Whenever a light would go out, it would grow closer and closer. Leo clenched his jaw and picked up the pace. It was going to be another close call. As the creature drew closer and closer, Kris started laughing louder and louder. It was a laugh that mimicked the monsters. "Almost there, buddy," said Leo through gritted teeth. "Just keep hanging on." Once they were only a few feet away from the door, the light above them exploded. They were suddenly engulfed in the dark, but Leo kept moving. When they both crashed against the door, Leo fought desperately to search for the doorknob. He kept his eyes closed tight. He didn't want to see the monster's horrible grin. When his hand eventually found the doorknob, he swung it wide open and they fell through the doorway. Leo then quickly scrambled to slam the door shut. Before doing so, he looked in the hallway and saw nothing but darkness. The smile and his piercing eyes weren't there like he expected. He used his foot and kicked the door shut. He started panting heavily and fell onto his back. "Are you okay back there, Kris?" He didn't respond. Leo shifted his body to face him. "Kris?" He crawled over to him and started to rock him gently. "Kris, you good? Are you alright?" There was a moment of silence before Kris drew a long breath and sat straight up. The sudden movement made Leo's heart jump. Kris stared blankly at the door before turning his head to meet Leo's gaze.
We actually made it.
"Barely. I'm surprised it didn't catch us. How are you feeling? Are the voices gone?" Kris sat silently for a moment. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just smiled and nodded.
I'm good. You don't have to worry about me.
They did theorize that escaping the level would potentially help Kris, but something still seemed off about him. Leo studied Kris for a moment before turning his attention to the 2 staircases behind him. The one on the left went upstairs to level 3, the same level Leo started. The stairs on the right led to level 1. It was labeled the exit. "Here we are! Just one more level to go and we're out of here." Kris got up and quickly descended the stairs. He looked up at Leo with a big smile.
Shall we?
The smile was unnerving. Something about it seemed very sinister. "Yeah." Leo's response was slow and full of apprehension. While the prospect of finally escaping was invigorating, Kris's behavior made him tense. Kris swung the door wide open and stepped through. Not wanting to fall behind, Leo quickly followed. As they stepped through the door, his heart sank to his stomach. Every door that lined the halls had a neon green exit sign on the top. He turned around to see if he could stop the door from closing, but he was too late. The door was no longer there. They were stuck. "Oh, you gotta be joking. It's like every level gets more and more sorted." Kris didn't comment. His head was tilted back and he stared mindlessly at the hanging lights. The fingers on his left hand were twitching. Kris?" Leo's voice snapped him out of his trance.
Huh?
"What's with your hand?"
What do you mean?
"Your fingers, dude. They were twitching a second ago. And why are you staring at the lights?" Kris frowned and looked at the ground.
I zoned out, is all.
"You zoned out? That was zoning out? Be serious. What's going on?"
I told you. I zoned out.
With that, Kris turned around and stormed down the hallway. Not wanting to anger him further, Leo let Kris walk ahead before following behind him. The first door Leo opened led to a room with a giant hole in the center. "Oh, what's this?" Leo crept closer to the hole. The pit was dark and deep, so deep that Leo could not see the bottom. He squinted his eyes and then looked around the room for any objects. On the other side of the pit was a blue pen. Leo picked it up and tossed it down the hole. He then bent down to see if he could hear it land on any surface. After a few seconds, there was a light thud.
What are you up to?
Leo looked up and saw Kris standing at the door's entrance. His posture seemed more rigid than before. "Oh, I found this pit, and I wanted to see how far down it goes. I reckon that it goes down about 20, maybe 40 feet. I don't think there is a way down, and frankly, I don't think it would lead anywhere anyway."
I can push you if you want.
There was an awkward pause before Kris started chuckling.
I'm kidding. That's a silly idea. I mean, how would I be able to eat your body if you were down there?
What? Come again?
You're kidding? You're too serious, Leo. Come on. Let's see if we can find an actual exit.
Leo hesitantly followed Kris out of the room. "So, have you found anything yet?"
Nothing really. Every door I open leads to another hallway or empty room. But I have been wondering, what kind of monster you think we're running at this point?
I've been dreading the possibility of running into another one. I've already had 2 close calls already, and I don't know how much luck can carry me further.
I hear you. He really is pessimistic.
Leo stopped walking. What? Kris squeezed his eyes tightly and lightly thumped his head.
I'm sorry, I think I'm still suffering from some of the trauma from the previous level. I'll be okay, I promise. Just recovering is all.
Are you hearing voices again?
No. Yes. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think they're just my thoughts, and I'm sure over time I'll get my head straight.
Kris then made his way to one of the exits and swung the door open. His eyes widened with excitement.
Think I found our way out of this place, pal.
"Oh yeah?" Leo walked over to Kris and took a peek. Inside the room was a downward spiral staircase. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Whoa, I haven't seen something like that before.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's check it out.
They hastily made their way down the staircase. As they made their way down, it got darker and darker, and the further they went, the more Leo grew uneasy. We've been going down these steps for a while now. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about this. What if we were walking right into the lion's den? Kris muttered to himself, then loudly cleared his throat.
Didn't you say we needed to go down this place to escape?
Well, yeah, but I imagined we'd have to find some exit to move on to the next level. They've been doors so far, and why would that change?
Are you an expert, Leo? Do you know exactly what's going on here?
Well, no, but from what I've seen so far, it is reasonable to conclude that we must find the proper exits to get out of certain levels. Kris again muttered to himself. This time he was a little more vocal, but still not clear.
Dab. Now. No. Won't.
Excuse me?
Don't ask me if I'm fine. I've already told you I'm still recovering.
Before Leo could ask another question, a dim light appeared further down the staircase.
Now we're getting somewhere.
They picked up the pace. Before long, they found themselves in a hallway similar to the ones above them. Every door had the same neon green exit sign.
How is that possible? Shouldn't we be on a different level?
Leo sighed heavily. Yep, just as I expected. We'll only get out of this horrible place when we find the right exit.
This is driving me insane. How many of this is even possible? None of the levels, monsters, or just long hallways make sense.
Well, I sometimes wonder if we actually died in the gas station, and now we're in some sort of hell. Kris's left hand began to twitch again, and he grabbed it tightly, taking a few deep breaths. Leo silently observed and noticed that the butterfly knife was sheathed on his left leg. Kris, your hand?
Yes, I know. Give me some space, please.
Kris mumbled to himself while pacing around. I can't let him keep that knife, Leo thought. Do you trust me?
What kind of question is that?
Well, you told me you're still recovering, and I believe you. I know that you will overcome whatever you're facing. But Kris, you keep reaching for that knife, and I'm afraid you'll hurt yourself. If it makes things easier and to keep you safe, I can take care of your knife and give it back whenever you feel good. What do you say? Kris's eyes widened as he took a few steps back. Leo stopped moving when he saw Kris's left hand gripping the handle. I don't want to keep it. I'm here to help you. I have my own weapon. I don't need yours.
You're trying to leave me defenseless.
That's not my intent at all. I'm trying to protect you. To protect us.
You snake.
Kris clenched his jaw while his head and eyes twitched.
You're not worried about me. You're worried about yourself. Come to think of it, you've always been that way.
What are you talking about?
Every time we did a job together, you always seemed flanky. All you would do is complain about our safety, when really you were just looking out about yourself.
That's not true.
Oh, is it? What happened at the gas station, huh? I recall you abandoning me the second things looked bad. And I bet you didn't even look back to see if I was okay, or if I was even following you.
Okay, I don't know what got into you, but you need to calm down. You're making things up and getting more upset about nothing. Look, you can keep your stupid knife. I'm sorry I asked for it. Let's just cool down and take some time to rest. We've both been through a lot. Leo sat down and propped his back against one of the doors. Kris stared blankly at Leo for a few seconds before sitting against the opposite wall. Neither of them spoke to the other. A little rest is all we need, were Leo's thoughts before dozing off. Leo shifted around before slowly opening his eyes. Kris was no longer sitting across from him. Leo blinked a few times before slowly getting up onto his feet. Kris? Mumbling could be heard in one of the rooms, and a door was wide open. Quietly, Leo went to the door and stopped just before its frame.
You don't need him. He only thinks about himself. He would have shot you by now and used your corpse to satisfy his hunger. If you weren't a coward. Kill him. Do it before he musters the strength to kill you.
Who is he talking to? Leo slowly peeked into the room and saw Kris sitting shirtless on the floor. His back was towards Leo, but he could still see what he was carving into his right arm with his knife. The carving was a bloody smiley face, and it was similar to the one the creature in the asylum had. Oh my gosh, thought Leo. He glanced down at his pistol and was about to grab it before Kris interrupted him.
Eavesdropping?
Leo's face went pale. He quickly looked up at Kris. They were only a few feet apart now. Kris? Who were you talking to? Kris slowly pointed at the smile carved into his arm. It resembled the same one the creature from the asylum had. Without warning, Kris screamed and tackled Leo to the ground. The weight of landing on the hard ground, supplemented with Kris's weight, knocked the wind right out of him. Leo quickly used his arms to shield his face before Kris violently pounded at him. Using all his strength, Leo thrust his hip upwards, causing Kris to tumble forward, hitting his head against one of the doors. Leo grabbed onto Kris's left elbow and bent it inwards before using his other hand and legs to push him off. Kris crashed onto the floor, but before Leo could get up, Kris slashed his ankle with his knife. Leo shouted in pain and tried to unholster his pistol, but was too slow. Kris was already up on his feet, and the two wrestled for the gun. Since Kris was much bigger and stronger than Leo, he knew that he wasn't going to win with just sheer strength, so he did what any reasonable person would do. Leo launched his right knee between Kris's legs and connected hard with his crotch. Kris's grip on the gun weakened just enough for Leo to break free and create as much distance between them as possible. Leo aimed his weapon at Kris and didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. One bullet ripped into his waist and the other penetrated his chest. Kris fell onto his knees. He slowly looked up and made eye contact with Leo, and his eyes were full of fear and remorse. A single tear ran down Kris's face, and Leo's heart broke when he realized his friend's brokenness and what he had just done. Kris, I am so sorry, I didn't want... Those were the only words Leo managed to choke out before a burst of maniac laughter cut him off. It was coming from Kris. Leo took another step back when he saw the same sadistic smile the monster wore across his dying friend's face. Kris maintained eye contact with Leo as he slowly got up. How is that possible? He didn't wait to find out. Leo turned around and ran as fast as he could. He turned every corner and went through every door that led to a different hallway. He was running so fast that his legs quickly began to ache. Once there was considerable distance between him and Kris, Leo took a moment to catch his breath. I need to keep moving, if I want to have any chance of escaping this place. Leo repeated that thought to himself over and over again as he jogged through the halls. Sweat trickled down his face, and he started to feel lightheaded. The absence of food and water on top of everything that had transpired was once again taking its toll. Leo slowly navigated the halls, checking every corner just in case Kris somehow caught up to him. Occasionally, Leo could hear footsteps or the sound of a door opening and closing not too far out. The thought of fighting Kris again made him nauseous. At this point, he was in no condition to fight, and his circumstances had grown desperate. After checking a corner, Leo slowly and quietly opened another door. On the other side was a spacious room with 4 different exits. The ones on the right and left had the usual green neon sign, while the door directly across from him had a bright red exit sign straight ahead. The sight of it was enough to bring Leo to tears. Right when he was about to make his way to the exit, the door to the right violently swung open. It was Kris. Leo didn't waste any time sprinting to the exit. He was only a foot away from the door before being side-tackled. No! Leo fought desperately to free himself. He scratched and bit whatever parts he could, but Kris wasn't fazed. He laughed and pinned Leo's arms to the ground. Don't do this. The exit is right there. We're so close. Please, let me go. Kris leaned in closer. His face was unrecognizable. The smile no longer seemed to fit him, as it quite literally stretched from ear to ear. His eyes were completely black and void of any color. His skin, now ghostly white, seemed too tight for his skull. A sharp pain suddenly shot through Leo's body. He let out a short gasp and slowly looked down to see a butterfly knife inserted deep into his abdomen. Another jolt of pain shot through his body, and Kris twisted the blade clockwise. Leo's vision began to blur when Kris pulled the knife out. He then got up and stood over his body. Slowly, the room began to change. The exit signs disappeared, and the room gradually morphed into a hallway. The walls were run down, and the lights were replaced with loud fluorescent lights. The floor was no longer solid concrete. Instead, they were white and green tiles. The room had morphed into the previous level, and the creature from the asylum suddenly appeared and loomed over Kris. No longer restrained by the straitjacket, it rested a claw on Kris's shoulder. White pupils revealed themselves from the darkness of Kris's eyes as soon as the creature appeared. They were now the very same eyes as the monster. Both maintained eye contact with Leo until his vision finally faded and life withdrew from his body.